Some of you are aware, a couple of weeks ago I had hernia surgery. I had an umbilical hernia, which looks just a little bit like you're just a little bit pregnant. It's this little tiny bump around my belly button, about the size of half of a ping pong ball. And decided I didn't want it anymore. My doctor said it was bad to keep it around. So I had surgery. My concern about the surgery was when to fix a hernia, they cut you open. That part concerned me. And then they put in mesh, like this little plastic mesh. And when I met with the doctor said that there's a 5% chance that it won't work, that the mesh in your body will disagree with each other. And 5% chance to me is a pretty big chance. I'm not excited about that. 1 out of 20 people, the mesh doesn't work very well. So I had a few people, I just contacted a few when I was going in and said, I'm not really worried about the surgery. I've had a rotator cuff surgery done, and that was a bigger surgery. But I was a little concerned about the 5%. And so I said, would you just pray through this surgery that the mesh would work? And God didn't answer that prayer the way I wanted him to. When the surgeon got in, they decided that this hernia in my abdomen was too small, and they didn't put any mesh in at all. So when you pray, don't be quite as specific sometimes, because God knew what I really was hoping for was no plastic in my stomach at all, and I felt like I should at least pass along that God exceeded my prayer by not even having any mesh put in my stomach, and I wanted to acknowledge that and be grateful for that. And for those of you that were praying, I can't mow my lawn for 6 weeks. That's also an answer to prayer. But the surgery went well. It's good to do that.
Thank you, Lord.
Now, in terms of today's sermon, before I get started here, I'm about to say something that's going to... I cleared part of my schedule because I know that this is going to bother some people. So I'm free on Tuesday and Thursday if you want to talk. So I like Tom Cruise. I just want people to know that. I am a Tom Cruise fan, and I actually, Charlie, we had lunch with Charles and Frida, and said that we had gone and seen a movie, Judy and I, and Charles doesn't like Tom Cruise. Is that a fair assessment? So but I do. I find Tom Cruise to be a good action hero. And Judy and I wanted to go see a movie, and so we did. We went to see the new Top Gun movie. We saw the old one back when it came out, and I thought it was pretty good. And so we went to see the new Tom Cruise movie. It had made $124 million on its first weekend, and I thought, how can $124 million be wrong? So off we went. I like the setting and the story. I've always been interested. When I was a kid, I built military plane models, and I always liked that sort of thing. And so I knew pretty good chance I'm going to like this movie, and I did. If you like the first one, you'll like the second one. I'm not advertising for it, but just so if you didn't like the first one, you won't like the second one, because it is essentially the same movie remade with an older Tom Cruise. But watching the movie, and one of the things that I enjoy, and I sort of struggle a little bit with this because I like military stuff. I think military stuff's cool, right? And it's aircraft carriers are pretty neat. The F-18s that they were flying in the movie, those are pretty cool. I built one of those, a model of those once in my life, and so to see them flying, and they're real planes, it's not all CGI. They're actually flying planes and doing some cool stuff. And then I'm sitting in the movie and thinking, man, the U.S. military, we got some pretty cool stuff. As a matter of fact, we have, what you see, there's a picture of a United States carrier strike group. We have 11 of them, the U.S. does. They come in right about $1 trillion a piece, it seems like, but we have 11 of them. And the rest of the world combined has 1/2 this aircraft carrier surface space that we have. The United States has double the rest of the world's aircraft. You don't want to know that, right? Why are you preaching that, Dave? I'm not preaching that. I just think it's interesting. So I'm sitting in the movie and I'm thinking about that, and I'm thinking about other things. You know, my mind kind of wanders around. I fall asleep sometimes in movies. I think about other things during movies. And I was thinking about these aircraft carriers, and it pops into my mind this because it's around there, this war in Russia thing that's going on. The Russians attack the Ukrainians, and then I start thinking of some of the pictures I've seen and some of the stories I've seen and some of the things I've heard. And I think I have said this before. I don't like Russia. I like Russians that I've met, but I don't like Russia as a country. I've never met the country, but I don't like them. I don't like what they do. I don't like how they present themselves. I don't like the things that are going on in the world. And then specifically, I'm sitting in this movie and I'm thinking about this, and it goes through my mind a couple of times that things that Putin has said. And one of the quotes that he has up there, Putin warns ominously of red lines that, if crossed, would bring a powerful asymmetric response or World War III. And I'm looking at our aircraft carriers and our F-18s and thinking we have 11 carrier strike groups and Russia has one carrier, and I'm thinking, bring it on. Just telling you the truth. I'm sitting in this theater and I'm thinking, you know what? I'm so tired of this war thing and this guy Putin and him saying, you know, we're going to make this war even bigger, and now I'm thinking, bring it on. Now, please hear me. I realize that could end the entire world. But I don't think that way. I'm just thinking in terms of squaring off with somebody that is really a punk, kicking around a kid on a playground, and we have the capacity 11 times over to say, hey, knock it off. Now, that's not the point of this sermon. Because while I'm sitting there, this goes through my mind too. Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will see God. And I think, I don't know if I can think, bring it on and be a peacemaker. And then it reminds me that Jesus said, you shall be my witnesses. And I'm a pastor, right? I ought to be one of his witnesses. I'm watching Tom Cruise shooting down Russian pilots. There's a piece of me that would dearly love to just put an end to this whole war thing, because I think we could do it in the flesh, right? And then I remember, you shall be my witnesses. I'm going to introduce you to a phrase you may not know. Hey, look, a squirrel. I don't have any idea where this phrase came from. It showed up in my classroom at one point. We were talking about a couple of students. It didn't matter what conversation with you're having, that any time, you know, something, a little sound over here or a little something over there, somebody walks by the window and their attention, gone. My dog's this way. We walk my dog every morning. And if a squirrel shows up, normally she's fine. She's walking along. She might sniff around here, try and pull up a weed there. Squirrel. Hey, Piper, pay attention. Not while there's a squirrel. We got somewhere to get. There's a squirrel. When I'm sitting and watching this movie, pastor of a church, lover of Jesus, start thinking, we should mess those guys up. Look, a squirrel. I get distracted from my goal. I get distracted from the thing that I know is the most important because of me. A few days ago, there's a shooting. Kids getting killed in a school. It's not the first time. I start thinking about it. I get ideas. I could fix this. We could fix this. My ideas start to stack up. I start to read what other people's ideas are and think, well, you're an idiot, but maybe someone else has a better idea. And then I read that and I think, no, if they just listen to me, I could fix this. See a couple of friends think, we could fix this, right? And I start telling them what my ideas are. We were in Portland, Judy and I, last weekend before, something like that. Homeless people everywhere. I thought Seattle had it bad. Portland's got it worse. Because Portland has unfathomable homeless issues, and we've got them bad. I see the tents, I see the people, and I have people asking me for food, and Judy and I are out just for a walk downtown Portland, see a guy with a needle in his arm talking to his friend as he's shooting up, and I think, I could fix this. I start to focus on what's causing this. Is it an affordable housing crisis? Because I've been told there's an affordable housing crisis. Is it the opioid crisis? Because I've been told there's an opioid crisis. Is it the pharmaceutical companies? We need to take care of the pharmaceutical companies. Those guys, they've got lobbyists. We need to get rid of the lobbyists. Matter of fact, we probably should get term limits, because if we had term limits, then the lobbyists couldn't wager against them and cause them to vote for things. So we need to get term limits. You know what this is causing? It's making my property taxes go up, because there's affordable housing crisis. We need to fix the property tax problem, because I can't afford my taxes anymore. Dow Constantine, I got to get rid of that guy. I'm going to vote him out. We got a problem. And none of my ideas will work. None of them will work. It's the one problem I'm absolutely convinced that I can't fix. And you can't either. But here's what I do believe about it. Look, a squirrel. Why? Because it distracts me. It distracts me from my purpose. I become an issue evangelist. I want you to remember this term, because you do too. I've watched Facebook, I've looked at social media for long enough, I've listened to the news, I've listened to people talk, I've been in restaurants, stood behind a guy over at Bartell's who was telling the checkout counter how he could fix the problem. We become issue evangelists. Let me tell you about this problem. I can fix it. Let me tell you what this problem's doing in my life. I can fix it. Or I just don't like it. We become issue evangelists. Jesus said, go into the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. The gospel. We should not be proclaiming issues to the whole world. We should be proclaiming the gospel to the whole world. It's right there, the gospel. The good news isn't your property taxes coming down. The gospel isn't saying that we could get rid of homelessness, or stop school shootings, or stop Russia. That's not the good news. If you don't know it, that's what gospel means, good news, right? There's lots of things that seem like good news. I got a check in the mail from the IRS because they owed me money. It seemed like good news. But it's not the good news. Judy and I went out for a walk with our dog the other day, and it was supposed to pour down rain. We got most of the way through our walk, hadn't rained. That's good news. It's not the good news. We get distracted. So what is the good news? The next 2 weeks I'm going to talk about this. The topic, subject, the sermon title, but the broader subject is called a gospel presence. We need to know what the good news is. I'm not going to answer that yet. What's the bad news? Sometimes we've got to know what the bad news is before we can understand what the good news is. And the bad news is changing. Does that change the good news? I'm going to argue it makes it more complicated. And the church has gotten too simple on what the good news is. What's the bad news? Here's the bad news. The world's broken. The world is broken. You don't have to look very far. Just turn on your news. It doesn't matter which network you like. Just turn on your news. Turn it back off again in a couple minutes because it's got a lot of squirrels. But for a minute, just turn it on. You can see the world is broken. That's the bad news. The good news is that we can't fix it. Now, that might sound confusing, but that's our first piece of good news. If we could fix it, well, we'd have all kinds of problems because we'd try. The Bible doesn't propose solutions to the world's problems. How do I know that? Revelations 21:1, then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and the first earth had passed away. This world's going down. We can't change that. We can ride on the Titanic and go, this wall needs a paint job. We can ride on the Titanic and go, the food's not very good. We could start strategic planning on how to improve the interior design of the Titanic. To no avail. It's going to go down. So's this planet. That sounds like doomism. I didn't write a book. This world's broken, beyond repair, and the good news isn't we can fix it. It's one of the problems that's going on in our society right now. Christians are presenting as though if we could get it, we could fix it. No, we can't. We can't fix it. Good news is a faith, not a program. The good news is that God exists, not a system exists. We have to get it clear in our minds. The world's broken. We can't fix it. So let's do what we've been called to do. So the good news, we're still not going to answer it. I'll let you know I'm not going to answer it until next week. But we've been told how to manage the good news when we actually understand what it is. You are the salt of the earth. We talked about this earlier this year. We're going through and looking at things that Jesus said in the book of Matthew and the book of John, and looking at it in the middle of the sermon that he gives that is so central to everything that Jesus wants us to understand. There's a teaching going on in church, and I was not as aware of it even a year ago. There's a teaching going on that Jesus' teaching doesn't matter because it came before the resurrection. Why would he bother? Why would he say these things if it doesn't matter? But and I was thinking about this teaching. It's called, I forget the exact name of it. It's like super grace or something like that. And essentially, the teaching is to get us out of everything we ever done wrong, and we don't really need anything other than just, I believe in God and live your life, you'll be fine. Which isn't gospel. But where's it coming from? It's coming because the church doesn't want to do its job. We don't want to repent of the things that we've been doing wrong. We don't want to take Jesus serious about the things that he said to do. And so we need a doctrine that will help us feel okay about that. Scripture talks about that. There's all kinds of teachings that are going to come up that tickle your ears to make you feel, oh man, I'm not as bad as I thought. Things aren't as bad as I thought. It's all good. Go live your life. We were told we're the salt of the earth. What is it about salt? I'm not going to go through, you've heard teachings on salt. Here's the thing that I'm interested about salt. Salt is a spice that permeates. When you put salt on something, think about it. You put salt and you put pepper on something, that's usually kind of the two things that are sitting on a table, right? You put salt on and pepper on it. After about 15 seconds, you can only see one of the two, right? The pepper. Why? Because the salt permeates. It goes in. It doesn't advertise itself. You can't tell if thing's got a lot of salt on it until you taste it. If it's got a lot of pepper, you can see. We're the salt of the earth. We're supposed to permeate the earth. We're not supposed to advertise it. We're just supposed to do it. We're the salt of the earth. You're the light of the world. What does light do? Ever think about light? You either have it or you don't. Right? You can dim the lights, but if you're in a dark room, it doesn't matter how far you dim them. As long until you shut them off, there's light. Light is. That's it. It is. Is there any light? Can you have half of light? You have a phrase, it's in the half light. What does that mean? It's not quite as bright. Can you still see? Yes, then there's light. When you know there's no light, you can't see. Why? Because it's dark. We are supposed to exist in a way that we're simply there, and it's noticeable when we're gone. We don't very often go, that's some good light. It's just there. It's just existing. It's just making it so you can see. And that's what light's supposed to do through us, is help people see God. The salt of the earth, the light of the world. Here's the problem. Oh, squirrel. We like to throw our pepper in with the salt. My mind in this little metaphor that isn't biblical, but I think it fits. Pepper's all our issues. All the things we want to talk about. All the things we care about. I don't care what it is. It distracts. It covers up. We put our issues out there with other people, and what happens is those other people, they may not agree. Whatever my solution is for kids getting shot in schools may not be your solution. Just for fun, the other day when I was working on this, I wrote down, because I'd done some reading on it, and I wrote down 4 different solutions that different sorts of people had, and they were all very different, and they would all function very differently. And I thought, if we set those 4 people in a room, they would probably leave not liking each other. Why? Because they have their opinion. And I'd like to say I don't care about the issue. I do care about the issue. I don't want kids to ever get shot again. But it's a squirrel. It's a squirrel. And so and you just start pulling the issues out. Go on Facebook and look at arguments. They're squirrels. Just go look. Here's this going on. Here's what we should do. It's a squirrel. Well, what about this? What about the people that are running the Highline School District? Not to call anybody out, hope you guys aren't watching, but there's a lot of conversation now. We're changing administrations, the new people in the Highline School District. These are the things so I was sitting with a teacher friend of mine, and the teacher started telling me all the things that this new person was probably going to do that the last person didn't do. And then another person said, yeah, but I liked what that person did. And you could just feel the tension. Squirrels. We like to cast shade. I didn't even know this was a phrase. I was looking for a picture, and I typed in casting shade, and it brought up throwing shade. And apparently throwing shade's a phrase that came in. I'm not cool enough to have known this. But to throw shade actually is self-explanatory, and I'm glad the phrase exists. It means to take some of my blame and throw it at somebody. To bring them down, to make them look worse. We like to do this. And it may not be against a person. We like to share our darkness. You ever done that? I'm really bothered by this. I'm going to tell some people. This really gets on my nerves. I'm going to tell some people. I'm going to bring them down with me. I'll throw a little shade out. But we're supposed to be the light of the world. So while there are massive tragedies that are taking place throughout our world, we're supposed to be the light of the world. How are you the light of the world about the war in Ukraine? How are you the light of the world about homeless? How are you the light of the world about kids getting shot? I'm not going to answer those questions right now because we've got to know what the gospel is. Once we know what the gospel is, and that good news, see, all the things that I'm talking about are products of that broken world that are darkness. We got to bring the light. The light isn't talking about the solutions or the problems. It isn't acting like we know the solutions. It isn't showing how educated we are about the solutions. The gospel is the light that's supposed to come through us so that people have hope in something other than the system's solutions. This is the verse that Pastor Terry wrote, "For we are a fragrance of Christ to God among those who are being saved and among those who are perishing." An interesting verse. First of all, that we're a fragrance. You know what a fragrance is? Anybody ever walk up to you and say, "Hey, did you see that fragrance?" No. Why? Because it just comes in. You can't see it. You can't feel it. You just sense it. I got into an elevator once a few years ago with a guy who had a fragrance. I hit whatever upper floor I was going to. He hit the floor above me. And then it stopped on the next floor, and a couple more people got in, and they hit a couple of other buttons. So I got out. It wasn't a good fragrance. Fragrance just comes in, fills you up. We are the fragrance of Jesus. We're the fragrance of God. We're supposed to be where? Amongst those who are being saved and those who are perishing. Yeah. See, we're not supposed to be the one who points out, hey, you guys who believe this, and you guys who do that, and you guys who do, you guys are going ahead. No. We're the fragrance of God. Exactly the same way between the two sets. And Terry read on. I'm not going to put the rest of it up right now. But the saved and the unsaved, those who know God and who don't know God, will experience that fragrance differently. We can't change that. But the fragrance is exactly the same. Their response to it is different. I had somebody say they liked the smell of cooked broccoli. What do you say to that? Liar? The only conclusion I could come to is they experience it differently than I do. I eat broccoli now. Born again. But when I walk in the house and I smell cooked broccoli, I wonder why I eat it. Different people experience the fragrance. Even though it's the same, we experience it differently. Non-believers and believers will experience our fragrance of Christ differently. But if we're mixing the fragrance of Christ with the fragrance of us, everybody's going to experience it wrong. It's going to be a stench to everyone if we're mixing up the gospel with the system. Everybody will experience it wrong, and they'll get off the elevator that you're on to be with them. They'll get off. Amongst those who are being saved and amongst those who are perishing, a gospel presence. We need to bring the presence of the gospel and only the gospel. So I'm going to end today. If you're not going to be here next week, it's up to you. We'll record next week, so I would encourage you to watch both pieces. Because so far I haven't given you what you need. But I'm going to ask you to think about 3 things this week. 1, what is the gospel? It's not John 3:16. It includes John 3:16. But it's more complex. We need to understand what it is. Second one, what is my fragrance? Not mine, yours. Think about it. What are people experiencing when they stand near you, talk to you, ride the elevator of life with you? What is your fragrance? And is it mixed or not? And third, what are my squirrels? What I would like to do with Russia is a squirrel for me. Because when I see what's going on and I think our country should be able to solve this, it's a squirrel. And if I talk to you about it, it's a squirrel. Now, if we're just sitting around having fun and chatting, that's different, right? But if it's something, if I'm trying to sway you, you're trying to sway me, it's a squirrel. What are your squirrels? I think we have to answer these 3 questions before we can check to make sure we're doing it right. But I believe the church is following more and more squirrels, mixing up their fragrance and losing the gospel. And we don't want to do that. So pray about these 3 questions this week. And next week we'll come back and figure out what is the gospel. God, thanks for these friends. Fun to be together. For me, I believe that you want to clean up my fragrance. You want me to have less squirrels. You want me to remember what I'm called to and stay focused on that. My hope and desire is we, as a body here at JCSL, can do that together. That we can know what's the good news. Put a wall around it and let nothing else in. To mix it up and confuse those who right now might be perishing, but might smell it and go, that is a smell I want to be around. Help us, Lord. Speak to us this week. Challenge us. Allow us to challenge ourselves. Give us the courage to look for the truth. In Jesus' name, amen. God bless you guys. Have a great week.